lot, and I don't think anything we've done, fortunately, has been of as consequential to as many people as the decision about how and where and under what circumstances we have remote learning and regular schooling. So, and I think after all that over the past week, I think what looks like to me is that we still aren't sure what will happen in a few weeks. So I think the best advice, if I have any at all, is to sort of get used to, as we all are, in one form or another, at least try to roll with the flow. And if folks, insofar as the behavior and keeping a lid on the virus in this area, to the extent we can do that and keep our numbers low, I think that's the best single thing that everyone can do to get back to normal in the classroom. So, anyways, that was last week. This week, we're really in a situation where we're trying to finish up a couple of projects that were started early in 2020, and getting ready to commence with a lot of paving. So we're not quite a month away from the beginning of the Harding Way resurfacing project, and so as that gets a little more defined and clarified, we'll use this forum and whatever else we can do, including our Facebook and websites, to get the word out about when closures are going to happen, if there are any temporary lane closures, the milling off, and eventually the resurfacing. As we've talked about a number of times here, Harding Way from the west side of town all the way through town, and then out at 6th Avenue, where 19 breaks off from 97, 19 all the way out to the city limits. That part of the project we'll participate in, and then from what I understand, ODOT's going to go all the way to the county line and resurface 19 south on the way down to Candlewood. So that project. At the same time, this sounds like it's real complicated. It's not, but we're having to take a little extra care this year as we look at the rest of our paving schedule. The ODOT job is somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.4 million. We're going to do, by comparison, probably somewhere between $360,000 and $400,000. And why there's a range in that estimate really gets to some uncertainty about gas tax revenue and license plate tax revenue. So we've been waiting to get an update on revenues into the street fund, and hope to have that in the next couple of days. And then we'll, if you will, lock down for the next committee meeting exactly which segments of which streets, and then be able to calculate a number and look to have on the agenda for the second meeting in August the sale of our paving program. That ought to put us on target for a mid-September construction period. It won't be a very long construction period, so I have every confidence that by mid to late October we'll be finished up. And generally speaking, that's, while maybe not the best time of the year to sell a project like that, we'll certainly have little concern about asphalt plants shutting down in inclement weather kind of getting in the way of that. So things go as planned. We'll run past council for a second and final time, if you will, that estimate. I believe there's a committee meeting of streets and alleys in the week between the first council meeting of August, which is next Tuesday, and then what would be the fourth Tuesday in August. So that would be my hope. And as I think ahead just a little bit, we'll probably begin advertising that maybe as early as Wednesday following the council meeting. If not, then on Saturday, and run that for a couple of weeks and then open bids. So anyways, that's what I've got on. I mean, really, the other two projects, the bike path Charles Street are beginning to get wrapped up. The bike path is just very few incidentals. It's more of waiting for a little bit better weather to put some topsoil and seed the right of way around the path and officially open that up. End of last week, the fence contractor arrived. The kind of not so great news is it'll be the end of next week before they'll have that completed. It is a really irregular construction season, and I think this one has been, this project has been a little bit fouled up by availability of materials. So we're a little bit at the mercy of the contractor, the construction firms rather, or the fabricators, excuse me. We saw that last year with the light out at Brant Road and 598, so here we are again, getting the materials to the sites, the slowest part of this project. But, you know, as I'd said many other times before, it's getting a lot of use, and it's nice to see people out enjoying it. And if you want to go find a Gallionite with a smile on their face, that's probably a good place to find them. So, encourage you to go out there on you know, one of the non-90 degree heat days, and I think looks like we'll have a few of those the next few days. So, you know, that's really largely what we have. Matt and I are working along with the SCAT organization to really finish up a couple of grants that may open the door for the completion of the depot. We're pretty excited about that. We'll see how that goes. I've talked in this forum and a lot around City Hall about the fact that all of the money that has been appropriated in Washington and is coming out to the states, it's an amazing amount of money in Columbus, and eventually they'll get some of the gridlock loosened up in Columbus and begin to push some of that money out. And so we've been eyes open, ears to the ground, watching to see if there's different grant funding that may be available. And as I'd expected, it's starting to break loose. And so there's 2 or 3 things that we're working on here in town, and projects we've been trying to get delivered over the last months or years, that we may be able to use some of these additional funds as sort of a gap filler. And I think the depot would be one good example of a project that we might be able to finalize and get a realization of the vision that I think a lot of us have had. It sort of seems like there's a handful of folks working on it, but I believe pretty confidently that there's a large percent of the community that would really like to see that depot continue to look, to improve its looks, and then I think the most important part is to find some functionality or some uses, and that's what we're really working on here over the last couple 3 weeks. So I don't know, I'll stop. I'm not sure if there's anything. I'm not. No questions?
Not yet.
Okay, what I would say, just real quick, to see if there's a chance to see if there's some people out there with some comments. This week, although there's not a council meeting, there's a committee meeting tomorrow night with an agenda that's got a handful of items. I believe the Council Committee on Laws and Ordinances is going to take another look at the sidewalk ordinance and changes that can be made to the sidewalk ordinance that would not impose a huge burden on the people who have the sidewalk in front of their house, but in some way begin to correct the problem of uneven, unsafe sidewalks. I think likewise, and it's kind of the ugly twin sister, twin brother, twin sister, I'm in trouble. Are the large, old, somewhat dead or dying trees that cause the sidewalks to heave up. So we're going to at least begin a discussion about those 2 items. as well as a final kind of determination and approval, we hope, of an ordinance that will declare the East Side Fire Station as a building that's surplus to the city's needs. So, although that has not been discussed very much, I think we're well on the way to changing the zoning, and along with that zoning change, it would be helpful to be able to have that declared surplus so we can go about the business of disposing of that property. So, anyways, that's tomorrow night, Tuesday night, and then Wednesday night is the utility committee meeting, and that agenda will be finalized tomorrow, but we'll begin the process of narrowing down any kind of adjustments in sewer. I believe a rate study, although it won't be done for Wednesday, is been commissioned by council, and the rate consultant that we used to help devise a long-term plan for funding for the water fund has been hired to do a similar assessment of the sewer fund, so we'll begin to look at that. I'm not sure if the legislation to advertise for buyers, bidders of our transmission part of our electric system. I'm not sure if that legislation will be ready next Tuesday. I wouldn't be surprised, however, if there were either some questions or some ongoing discussion about AMP-T as it's described, and whatever else that the utility committee has on the agenda. So, we still begging for questions, or you got one?
No, I actually have
Okay.
two, and both of them came from Dawn.
Okay.
So let's start with our first question.
Sure.
She asked for an update on a grocery store.
Well, it's never far from my mind. I guess without teasing or anything, as I talk with people, and this is a good thing to get discussion on. I think it was 2 weeks ago, I talked a little bit about the Freeze Center, and over the next few days, and then over the weekend, there was a real healthy discussion about the Freeze Center, right or wrong, how you pay for it, one thing or another. I think that's real valuable in the community. So here Don will try to get that going with the grocery store idea. As I've looked at that, and I've said on this live stream and other places for months now, I'm really pessimistic about the opportunity to bring a grocery store into the Galleon West Center. I mean, if it happens, I'd be among the happiest people, but I'm not counting on that. And also for months I had talked the talk about I have confidence in the grocery store industry, and I have confidence in the landlord that there's more in it for them, so to speak, than there is City Hall and getting a grocery. It turns out that I was probably wrong about that. I believe that it is more important to a large part of Galleon's population, certainly taking on an increasing importance, sort of we've got to get this done type of importance. And I believe that in order to get a new grocery in town, we're going to have some sort of initial public involvement, either help sponsoring the funding, help sponsoring or purchasing the land that the building would be built on. So I'm moved away from hoping, believing that we'll have a Galleon West solution with the landlord and the grocery store industry working it out, and beginning to believe we're going to have to build our own facility. Or at least, that's not the way to say it, to have at least a portion of Galleon city investment in getting this thing started, attracting the right kind of grocer and getting something built. Other thing I'd want to say before you get to the other question from Dawn is, as I look for sites, I keep moving east. And this might be the part that has I don't mean to stir up controversy, but there's definitely an age issue in terms of the importance of the grocery store. There might also be an income thing, but I don't want to open that. I don't want to get into that messy territory. As I talk to people, and like a few other people perhaps in town, I talk to a lot of people, and they usually tell me what's on their mind. And what I've seen increasingly lately, because Don, you're one of the ones that keeps the fire burning and asking about the grocery. What I've seen is the older the Gallionite is, the more they see the grocery store is a priority, is something we have to have, something that is a daily necessity, and not just something that is good for community ego and pride. I see it kind of all the above. I think we need one, although the places that have stepped forward are doing I think a pretty good job. I've said that 100 times. But I think it's something we need, and it's also something that gets to the status of a community like Galion. We're not going to be a county seat. We can stop that fight before it starts, and therefore there's certain commercial opportunities that Galion's going to have to fight harder for than other communities you see around Ohio that, let's say, have a Kroger or have a food town or more of a major chain. Those communities that perhaps are smaller than us, more often than not, are county seats. I'd say Mount Gilead's a good example. And so we have to, sort of face that fact. So as I look at the overall situation, to kind of wind down on this, I think that it makes more sense to look for opportunities to build a grocery store on a main drag, but east of the square, closer to where some of the older individuals in the community live, and without getting into neighborhood politics too deeply, the people who I talk to in town who are insistent, emphatic about having a grocery, tend to be east of the square and kind of south of Market Street. So that part of town, I think especially, is desirous of and needs a grocery store. And I think the younger people who, call up Kroger and order over the internet, or call up, that's even the wrong word, isn't it? Go online and place their order for pickup. I kind of wonder if that group of Gallionites would be regular shoppers in a Gallion-based market. So I'm really focused on the people in the community who see this as an important need, and try to tailor what we build at and aim it more towards the folks in the community that we know are going to use it. So that's a very long answer to the first question. What was the second one?
Yes, Dawn also wanted to know, behind the new bus garage, is that going to be a road extension?
Well, that's it. Is long discussed, and somewhere between where Heisey Park Lane ends at that three-way intersection at Hesby, and where Highland starts on the east end, that goes from Heisey Park Lane to Highland. So whether you call it the Highland Extension, which people don't particularly like, or the Heisey Park Extension, which I think people who use Heisey Park Lane would like to see. The right-of-way has been on the map for a long time, and there are no immediate plans to extend that roadway through there. Seems like a heck of a good idea. But there are, however, emerging more immediate plans to extend the bike path north, up Hesby Drive, and then west before you might go back north onto school property and up around the school complex. So might be a bike path first on, but so anyways, I think I did a really crappy job of provoking or getting a discussion about the grocery store going. That's my intent. We've got to do something about it, rather than me hopscotch around an answer every Monday night about what we're doing and why we're not. It has to become a top priority. And in the overall scheme of things, while I want to see the free center built, it seems really hard to imagine Galleon building an $8 million plus sports facility and not having something moving ahead on a more full service grocery store. So I think what we have here in City Hall is the self-imposed pressure of needing to execute on both the grocery store and play a constructive part in seeing the Free Center built.
And I wanted to point out, Veronica did have a comment
Yeah.
on all this, and I think it's along the same lines of what you just mentioned. She said it's BS that you can build some kind of sports center, but the needs of Galleon, but you're going to need, she might have forgotten a word, but you're
Yeah.
going to need the residents of Galleon to help pay to get a grocery store in town.
Yeah, it's not. I don't know. It's not BS. That's not quite what I said, Veronica. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but one thing that happened, gosh, I want to say it's 4 years ago now, maybe 5 years ago, is the old Crane plant on South Street was HTI gave it to the city, and we rented it for a while. I think many people remember, and we're in the process of selling that, and the money that comes in from the sale of that is really the dollars that I would propose investing as a portion of constructing that facility. What's happened, Veronica, is we've tried to get an equation, if you will, in getting a new grocery store in town, is that we keep coming up less than, and one of the things that we keep coming up less than on is what it would be required to build a new, and I don't see a good candidate for a rehabilitated or remodeled facility, but build a new 20,000 square foot type facility. So what I would see is a combination, since this came up, combination of that local money that you'd find coming into the city and into a capital improvements fund, some state money that we would work hard to fashion a grant around, and then some private investment. And it would be at least those three parts that would go together to build a modest but modern grocery that would have the ability to have fresh meat and a righteous quality produce and fresh vegetables and fruits. I think the two places in town that are doing that now are busting their butt to do it, but in my view, it doesn't quite meet the needs of the Galleon area. So, no, it's not BS. But I'm glad she asked that question, because that is the discussion we need to have. Can we responsibly take on big projects? But the other last thing I'd say about the grocery store is whether citizens have to use some of the money that city government has, by using some creativity, come up with. I mean, we didn't have that $100,000 that we're going to have as a result of the sale of the Commerce Center. So I mean, I think that money put into play to get a grocery store, I think it's citizens' dollars, but it's not taxpayer money. And the other thing I'd say about the grocery store is that, as they say, at the end of the day, we're going to pay for the grocery store because we're going to buy groceries that are there, and part of the price of the grocery is the price of having the building, the electric service, and all that goes with it. So, at least, if you want to put it negatively, everybody who shopped at the grocery store, their money, they would get something out of it, as well as paying the bills and bringing us, in a small way, bringing us a grocery store to town. And so, I don't know who else would pay for it, except the citizens, customers, and taxpayers. So, oh well.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Next question tonight comes from Shirley. So I want to give a shout out to Shirley Clark, who used to serve on City Council.
Sure.
She wanted to know when will the new apartments on Carter Drive be available to rent?
I think they're, gosh, I want to say 5, but there may be 8 that have already been rented, Shirley. we had a chance here, the office people, we're exercising our prerogative. We took a lunch break over there, gosh, it seems like middle of last week, and got a chance to tour them. They are really solid, as they say, they are what they are. They're real nice 1 and 2 bedroom apartments, and from what we were told by the agent that is doing the renting for the builder developer, is that there's been real good response. You know, you hear war stories or anecdotes about it, but I know of the people who have committed to move in, 2 are moving from Shelby, and they don't work here. They work somewhere else, but they're going to move here from Shelby. So I think that's a good sign, and the beginning of what we thought would happen surely with Avita doctors and Avita employees beginning to show interest and rent them is happening. So a little bit of a miscalculation. There'll be a Board of Zoning appeals on allowing for a little bit longer, deeper garages. They had anticipated more sedans, and they've got a lot of their initial tenants, and then people interested in moving in are more of the SUV crowd, and they need a couple more feet to be able to accomplish that. So that'll be, I think BZA, Board of Zoning Appeals, is going to do a tour tomorrow, at least some of them, and then next Thursday on the 13th, I believe that's next Thursday, yeah. There'll be a hearing and hopefully a good discussion about an additional variance for the property. But anyways, they're filling up. We've started conversations about them completing the 96 unit commitment. So I would say they feel pretty good about that. So I think they're going well, and you know, I think the response of the immediate neighborhood will have a lot to do with this initial takeoff, and how quickly they fill up and how they're perceived as an asset to the neighborhood. So good to hear from you, Shirley.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Next, Bill asked for a little bit of clarification from earlier when you mentioned the sidewalks getting discussed in committee.
Yeah.
Can you just kind of quickly summarize what exactly they're going to do in relation to sidewalks?
Well, I think what I imagine they'll do is continue a discussion about how the current ordinance directs city officials to identify deficient sidewalks, notify the owner, and then either have the owner of the sidewalk make repairs or have the repairs done and added to the taxes. It's worth tuning in. Some of this baseball stuff, is entertaining. Sometimes I'm not quite captured by the screen. So if you can work yourself away, those Zoom meetings have been informative and they're easy to tie into. The ordinance is the first thing that needs to be looked at, because when all of the city's ordinances were switched over from city manager to mayor, there were a few of them, and I mean, I bet 10 or 12, that the logic of the ordinance didn't make sense when the city was no longer operated by or was responsible to the city council. So the way the current ordinance reads is that the building inspector through the city manager, but now it says mayor, develops a list, and then council looks at that list of deficient sidewalks and makes a decision as to whether or not the building inspector then will go out and, if you will, order those sidewalks repaired. The way the structure under statutory is that council appropriates money, but they're really not in that regulatory realm. So one of the things we'll have to do is envision how to rewrite it so that the building inspector and the mayor make that determination, and then we'll have to see how city council involves themselves in approving the final list and who, if anyone, is scheduled for enforcement. So the way it sets now, city council would have to approve that list, and that's outside their domain or their lane under statutory form. So that's the first thing. The way that, and I'm not sure if Bill was kind of questioning, now how is that tied to the trees? But as I said, kind of as an afterthought, many of the trees that need to be removed, around which there's some discussion as to whether or not, there's one council member who's emphatic about saying that it relates to one section of the local codified ordinances, and there are a couple of other sections of that same set of codified ordinances that are in conflict as to who is responsible for those trees. So although that council member's not on the committee that meets tomorrow, I'm sure that point of view will be discussed. What I was trying to say, Bill, is that if you change the sidewalk ordinance, it makes a lot of sense to look at the tree ordinance that has some of the same irregularities or deficiencies and see if that can't be corrected at the same time to come up with a doable, a workable way to identify uneven sidewalks and identify dangerous trees and get them corrected. Right now, as it stands in some of the older parts of the city, we have both uneven sidewalks and dead trees, and quite honestly, and nothing happens about it. You know, I've been mayor 7 years, and we've not addressed that adequately. And it was a long time before we went back to a statutory form that this issue of trees and uneven sidewalks is kind of reoccurs, because it reoccurs for one reason, because we don't take care of it you know, when it comes up, and then it subsides and then comes back up. I hope tomorrow we begin to address at least partial solutions to sidewalks and whose trees are these old trees? Cities, property owners.
Okay.
Okay.
Jumping back to grocery stores,
Yeah.
Candace asked, why can't Gallion get a Kroger's or larger chain store?
Okay, there's a couple answers. One is the more straightforward one is that the Gallion area doesn't have a big enough population, and you couple that with what the sort of siting criteria, if that word makes sense, that these big chains use. And for the most part, under a certain population, if you're not the county seat, there has to be some reason for a Kroger or a chain like that to locate here. Now, if you look around the state, you'll find towns like Gallion who still have Krogers. One that comes to mind right off the top of my head is Fostoria. And what happened in Fostoria is they never lost their Krogers. You know, we had a Kroger's for a long time, old timers will tell you, and then the Kroger shut down. So now it's very difficult to get around that siting criteria. So I think that it goes for Kroger's, it also goes for others that you might list. Well, why can't we get that? Why can't we get that? I fully expect Bucyrus area to get an Aldi's before we can secure this much talked about yet to be finalized grocery for Gallion. I wish it wasn't the case, but you know, you hear enough about what's going on that there may be a project in the wind at Aldi's, and they tend to have the same siting criteria, but they also like to be near a Walmart. So those are things that we don't have here. That's caused me to focus most of my time when we look at a new grocery to look at some of the stronger independents. And while that niche, that part of the marketplace is getting smaller and smaller, there's still a handful of really solid operators I happen to gain a lot of confidence in the grocery operator that was going to come into the Galleon West, but the project just fell apart. So where we would start, where we've continued to keep in touch with, is that operator who's well-recognized grocer in Ohio, and really go for not a Meijer, not a Walmart-sized grocery store, but something maybe 2/3 that size, 25,000 square feet, and have high-quality food and neighborhood access to that. I think that's our best objective, the best opportunity to find that sweet spot, so to speak, where the investment level isn't so great, the rent wouldn't be so high. Sales are not going to, set any records. Even though we're kind of starved for local grocery, there's only so much money in the market, and so one of the things that'll be key is setting sales objectives that are targets that are reachable by that new grocer, and not set them up to have such tremendous sales to be able to cover the debt and pay the bills. So it's it'll be a little bit of threading the needle, but for me it's too darn important not to move ahead, not to continue to make that a top priority. And because it's difficult, because Kroger's probably doesn't want to come, doesn't mean we stay home and don't continue to work to make things happen or try to get something going here. So I sound like a coach of a losing football team, don't I? I don't quite feel that way, but I tell you what, we're going to have to really sharpen our game and work hard and come up with a combination of local investors, public investment, I believe, of the city or perhaps through the Port Authority, and then the state's going to have to, through one program or another, play a role in low-interest financing, or those always talked about but very elusive things known as grants. So you may see that. I said that a while. Local money, private, public, and some state money is probably what we're going to need.
Those
That
are all
is
the
all.
questions I had.
We're not going to find ourselves as a community in a position where, because it's difficult to land a grocery, where there doesn't seem to be the ideal location, there doesn't seem to be a building that checks all the boxes. That all of those things are true. We don't have the best site. We don't have the existing facility that's ideal and ready to go. But that's all the more reason to look at other ways to do it, look at a more modest store, look at trying to target the new grocery facility for the part of the town, geographically and income-wise, that really needs a grocery, that's less mobile, that maybe has less income, that ordering at Kroger's over the internet's not really an option. I got a responsibility. Those of us who are elected by the citizens have a responsibility to meet the needs of everybody in the community, and we're determined to do that. I think we can. I think we can meet some of the higher objectives of a new modern facility in the sports area, but you got to do that while satisfying, at least in my view, while satisfying the need for basics like a local grocery. And so that's what we're going to continue to work on. Stay tuned. Over the next month or so, we're going to be talking about tweaking some of our incentives. I believe there's an opportunity to get some more housing constructed in the community, and we may have to do some things to target some of our most redevelopable or developable ground to get a few housing starts going in the community. So whether it's down on South Market where the city acquired what some people will think is a difficult property, or other parts of town, we're going to start to target these open parcels and try to use tax incentives and utility incentives to get some new housing going. So over the next couple of weeks, as we move into the fall, we're not going to stay paralyzed by the COVID. We're going to move out on the items that are important in the community: new housing, rehabilitated housing, and some more options on groceries, as well as the sports entertainment thing that has been talked about quite a bit recently. So, having said all that, and I'm sure everybody wants to jump back to the Reds and the Indians. Maybe not, but I appreciate those people watching tonight, the questions we had, and council committee meetings tomorrow and Wednesday. Hope to have you tune in for those, and we'll see you next week. Good night.